So today I thought we would take a look at different gear ratios for AEGs or electric airsoft guns as to exactly what does those gear ratios represent for you when you're using them. So to start off with, when you buy a standard stock factory gearbox, it's going to come with 18-to-1 gears. They're pretty much the standard factory gear ratio, unless you're buying something that's unusual out there. So what does that 18-to-1 represent? Well, to give you a better idea, I have a clear gearbox here so you can actually see all the parts moving inside of it as we're running this test. What 18-to-1 means is that the motor is going to rotate 18 times for one rotation of the sector gear. So each time the gun fires, the motor will have rotated 18 times. And to get a better idea of that, we've got a drill gun here with a pinion gear on it and a stripe on it, so you can actually count the number of times. So if this works properly, when the gun fires, this should rotate 18 times. And there it is. So how does that relate to you? Well, the faster you can get that piston to fire and the less rotations of the motor, the faster the gun is going to react. One problem a lot of people have with electric gearbox guns is that they don't fire as quickly as like an actual firearm. So when you pull the trigger on an actual gun that's shooting bullets, the hammer strikes the primer and the bullet goes out the barrel almost instantaneously, where there's a little bit of a time delay between when you pull the trigger and when the gearbox cycles and fires the bullets. It's almost like shooting a black powder gun, where it almost takes a second or two for the powder to catch on fire and fire the gun off. So there are some limitations to that. So the faster you can get the gun to cycle, the more realistic it's going to be. And there's also other benefits in that you get faster full auto fire, which is pretty much how we're going to measure how the guns shoot, and the difference between the two, or the different gear ratios that are out there. The ratios we're going to be looking at are the standard stock 18-to-1, and then for comparison I've got a set of 13-to-1 gears that we're going to install in the same gearbox. And for the sake of making sure that, you know, it's a fair test, we're going to use the same gearbox with the same setup so that we can see what the difference is in how the gun reacts. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and install the 18-to-1 gears in the gearbox and start off with those. All right, so we've got our gun assembled. We're going to be using an 11-1 LiPo battery for this particular test. We're going to use the same battery in both test subjects to make sure that, you know, all of the other variables are accounted for. So you can see this is putting out about 12.41 volts. So this is a fully charged LiPo. You know, we could use a 9.6 volt battery for this test, but I think if you're going to be honest, if you're going to be putting in higher speed gears, you're probably going to be using higher voltage batteries to get the full potential out of them. So I don't see the point in doing lower voltage batteries for this particular test. Although it's all relative, because we're really just looking to see how much faster the 13-to-1s are going to be. than the 18-to-1. So for this particular test, we're using this is a G&G SRS. It's got a fairly short barrel on it, as you can see. I'm not sure that the barrel length is going to have a huge effect on the velocity, or, well, it will on the velocity, but I don't think that the length of the barrel is going to have a major effect on the rate of fire for this particular test. So what we're going to do is shoot this through our chronograph and get an idea of what kind of rate of fire we're getting. So for our first run here, we're running 18-to-1 G&G gears with an 11.1 volt LiPo battery. And the motor that we're using in this particular one is a G&G 18K motor. And we'll try it with a couple of different motors to see what kind of rate of fire we're going to get. So let's start off with the 18K motor. We're going to fire that through our chronograph up here. We're getting about 1,080 rounds per minute. So let's put that down here. All right, so let's try this same setup, but we're going to use a 35K motor. So this motor should be turning about twice as fast as the 18K motor. Once again, this is a G&G motor, and we're going to use it with pretty much the same setup, just the only variable is going to be using even a higher speed motor. The 18K motor is sort of a factory stock motor, so you can kind of get the feeling that an 18K motor with 18-to-1 gears is going to give you, should be somewhere in the neighborhood of what we just got with our first go-round. It would be an interesting test to do one day, to take a number of stock guns and try them to see what variances you get with rates of fire and velocities and stuff like that, just by, you know, there's going to be a certain amount of randomness to how the gun performs, even if it comes out of the same factory. But it would be interesting to sort of see what kind of deviation you get from one gun to another with the rates of fire, if all things were equal and they all had the same basic gearbox and the same basic motor and so on. So we'll try that out one day. So once again, this is an 18-to-1 gear set running an 11.1 volt battery and a 35K motor. So what kind of rate of fire are we going to get at this point? You can hear that's definitely a huge step up. We're getting about 1,600, between 1,580 and 1,600. We'll just call it, 1,580 rounds per minute. So going from an 18 to a 35K, we've kind of already done this sort of experiment before with different motors, but you can see this is sort of the range of rounds per minute that we're going to get with the stock gears. So let's find out what happens when we go up to our 13-to-1 gear set. And these are SHS gears. So let's swap these gears out and see what we get. All right, so these are our 13-to-1 gears. These are made by SHS. Most of the high-speed builds that we've been doing lately have featured 13-to-1 gears in them, and we've been having very good results with it. I know previous to this, a lot of guys were building guns using dual sector gears, or DSGs, which I found to be fairly unreliable because a lot of them were just not lasting very long. My theory on the subject is that the higher gear ratio, or not the gear ratio, but the fact that you're doubling the output of the gearbox, you're also doubling the wear and tear on it, so the guns generally tend to break down much quicker. I'm not sure if that's exactly, you can just chalk that up to the dual sector gear doing that, or the fact that the gun is now performing even faster. So especially younger kids that get guns like that tend to just beat them like a redheaded stepchild, and then they break very quickly because they're just generally beat on really badly. So, but I've noticed, long story short, 18 to 1 or 13 to 1 gears that we're using have been much more dependable, and we've seen a very long lifespan in them. Even, in rental guns where we're renting them out several times a week, we've had very good luck with them. In fact, the only major problem I've had is failures with things like solder joints on the Dean's connectors more than any other mechanical issues with the gearbox. So anyway, let's get this put back together and see what kind of performance we're going to get with our 13 to 1 gear set. Back to our thing here, we now have 13 to 1 SHS gears. We're going to run it once again with an 11.1 volt battery, and our first motor is going to be the 18K G&G motor. Let's see what kind of rounds per minute we get with the 13 to 1 gears. So, with the 18 to 1 gears, we got 1080. With 13 to 1 gears, we got 1310. So definitely a jump in the rounds per minute going just by changing the gear set. What happens if we put in the 35K motor? Does that, well, the question is not, is it going to give us better performance? The question is, how much better performance is it going to give us? So let's take this motor out, put the other motor in. This is a brand new 35K motor. Unfortunately, I had a few from the last test, but somebody decided that they needed them more than me, so I had to go out and buy a whole bunch of new ones. So now we've got some brand new motors, and we're going to be using them in some other future tests. I've got some more ideas for experiments that we could do with these airsoft guns, which we'll get to in the near future. So, and for the performance ratings that we're getting given these different motors, we might even be able to improve on them a little more if we tweak the motor height adjustment. This is all going based on that the motor height adjustment is in a good spot. It sounds reasonably good to me, but you can, if you super tune that up to get the maximum RPMs out of the motor, you can improve on your performance. And that's just a matter of turning the screw and firing the gun and just listening to the motor run, and you can kind of just use your ears to tell whether or not it's going faster. Once again, this is 13 to 1 gears, 11.1 volt battery, and a 35K motor. What do we got? I did adjust the motor height adjustment because this number just felt a little slow for what we should be getting with this setup. You can see the motor height adjustment will add additional performance to your build. So don't be afraid to experiment with that. What I do is I'm just adjusting the screw as I'm firing it, and I'm listening to the motor, and you could hear it actually start to speed up as it gets the right mesh between the pinion gear and the bevel gear. So it's worth tweaking that. You can see I got about another 300 rounds per minute faster by adjusting that particular screw. And that's something that you may want to mess with from time to time to, just increase the performance of whatever gun you're using. So what are the takeaways from this particular experiment? Well, when you're starting with a set of 18-to-1 gears and you're upgrading to a high-speed set of 13-to-1 gears, you can pretty much expect around a 25% increase in the rate of fire or the overall performance of the gearbox, meaning that how quickly it will respond when you pull the trigger. This is not going to affect your velocity, only how fast the gun shoots, not how fast the BB is moving. One of the things that I found interesting is that percentage of increase, that 25% increase in performance, seemed to be across the board no matter what kind of motor. So if you started out with an 18K motor versus having a 35K motor, you still got about a 25% increase in your performance. Now, if you decided to upgrade both the gear ratio and the motor, let's say you go from an 18K to a 35K motor and you increased your gear ratio from an 18-to-1 to a 13-to-1, you got an 85% increase in your performance. So essentially you went from about 1,000 feet per second to about 2,000 feet per second. So it was almost 100% increase in the general neighborhood. But I found that 85% was about the average that we saw there. And keep in mind, this is a range of results that you're going to get. It's not going to be exactly a 25%. It's probably going to be somewhere like 20 to 30%. But in this particular version of the experiment, it was about 25%. So if this is something you think that you're interested in doing with your gun and you don't feel like actually making the upgrade yourself, we do this here. We have various gear ratios that you can buy, and if you need them installed properly, best thing to do is bring it in and we'll be glad to do it for you. Just feel free to stop into the showroom or check us out on our website if you need more information. But best bet is to actually stop in with your gun. We could take a look at it, see what you're dealing with, and give you some ideas as to where we can go from there. So hopefully you can drop by sometime. And until the next time, don't let the bastards get you down.